I do my humble best to never imply or believe that any idea for a film is inherently a bad idea. There's so much more work that goes into the development and completion of any creative endeavor after the initial proposal that dismissing it at so early a stage can only feel premature. But it's not unwise to consider what the likeliest pitfalls an idea could be. The notion of a serious drama about the comic book villain the Joker, for example, that would address the tragedy of a mentally ill man let down by society, is a perfectly fine idea, but I would suggest that the first thing to consider is how much of this character's existing legacy are you really going to acknowledge. It's a bit like proposing that the next James Bond film should be about responsible gun control legislation. I don't mind an anti-gun film myself, but the last 25 films in that series were pretty trigger-happy. Similarly, despite the fact that the Joker has appeared in a wide variety of light and dark stories over the years, he is not someone with mental health issues. He's cartoon crazy. And yes, this includes the interpretations that are labeled grim and gritty as well as realistic, incorrectly, I would argue. They are all still heightened, exaggerated, the craziness a feature designed to be thrilling, exciting, fun. This is something that I think is worth bearing in mind if attempting to reinterpret the character as serious and tragic. And Joker certainly goes for it, nestling the mental and emotional turmoil of Arthur Fleck in the crime-addled and financially decrepit Gotham City. Todd Phillips attempts to reconcile Joker's violent psychopathy, his extreme anarchic criminality, and apathetic perspective on the world with a social critique on wealth inequality and the ignorance and stigmatization surrounding mental health treatment. And the question at the forefront of my mind throughout its runtime was, can the cartoonish, brash, loopy elements so associated with the character really ever merge with this empathetic, tragic perspective? And I think the end result was constantly at odds with itself in trying to bring these elements together, arriving at a muddled consensus over whether Arthur has deteriorated or broken free due to a fraught journey that didn't fully know how to frame him within the world the film constructed, or how the people surrounding him fit into the karmic system of Arthur's world. Arthur is framed in the end as having more resolve as the Joker. He doesn't believe himself to be lost anymore. But I think ironically, this is also the point where the story's take on Arthur is the most lost. And the sequel has singing in it. Honestly, expectations for Folie Deux were thrown all over the place for me ever since it was announced to be a musical. Add to that the recent critical and audience reception to the film, as well as when I sat down to watch it myself, discovering that the opening of the film was a Looney Tunes-esque animated sequence. I didn't think it was unreasonable to start expecting that I was about to get Todd Phillips' Gremlins 2 or Matrix Resurrections, an uproarious statement of, well, they're gonna make it with or without me, so I may as well take this blank check to be as brazen with my feelings as humanly possible, only for it to settle into much more familiar ground, more reminiscent of Star Trek Into Darkness or the Jurassic World films, in the sense that, while they acknowledge in the opening that they're at a different starting point than the previous film that they can't go back to, it then very quickly settles into mimicking the original's tone and beats. Arthur is in prison and famous as the Joker, but he's back to being lost and frail, his mental health at the forefront of the story as he is put on trial for murder, a corrupt and abusive prison system replacing the bureaucratic oppression of the first film, and his far-fetched hopes of all his problems being resolved by the love of a woman who truly understands him, taking the form of Lady Gaga's Harley Quinn. Usually the naive young psychiatrist broken and manipulated by Joker's machinations, here revised to be the dominant of the two, an obsessive rich girl with a psych degree who may just be stringing the ever-naive Arthur along for her own kicks. It was difficult to understand what all the fuss was about regarding this film's relationship to the first, when all the pieces feel set up almost identically to the first, as Harley goads the Joker persona back out. We've met all the bullies who need vengeance wrought upon them, the tension builds, and oh, Arthur chooses not to become the Joker this time. He becomes overly conscious about the innocent people who his exploits hurt the most, admits responsibility and regret. The people radicalized by his actions don't listen to him and only get worse. Harley leaves him because she was only in love with the fantasy of the Joker. The abusive guards at the prison get away with their cruelty, and Arthur dies in prison, stabbed by a violent inmate. This Joker will never become the crown prince of crime, come to blows with Batman, will never achieve anything, will likely be forgotten. Okay, good one. The ending did honestly prompt a genuine laugh from me. It's quite the punchline to a dark joke, and I think Phillips saying to the audience, I'm not sure I did manage to bring all of those disparate elements together. I'm not sure they can be brought together. And it is a respectably bold way of saying that, especially given how long the setup for it is, rivaling Tar for the longest, driest setup for a hell of a punchline before the credits rolled. That's the only question I'm left with this time in the case of Folie à Deux. Is leaving the big reveal to the end the most effective way to go about it? I think the most common interpretation of this film is that it feels like it's trolling the more outspoken fans of the first. A part of me still yearns to see the version of this film that goes for it from the very beginning, Gremlins 2 style, with Phillips giving the same attention to detail with a pastiche to Golden Era Hollywood musicals and Looney Tune cartoon antics, as he did with Scorsese crime dramas in the first film, and, well, admittedly most of this film as well. If he established from the get-go that his perspective has radically changed, I'd be more confident that he had a more concrete and cohesive statement to make with the second film than the first, especially given that it would far more literally embrace the anarchy that mostly Joker movies just state they're into. Nevertheless, it still does feel more assured than the first, if only in the sense that it really doesn't seem to like how the first one turned out.